And the idea behind this is that in doing the reviews, the athlete can also review his own progress and see how far he's come since he started this specific phase. So, for example, in the health and remodeling phase, he'll review with his physiotherapist or a strength and conditioning coach or something like that, for example, to see certain changes in his body, such as anthropometry. Has his body fat percentage changed? Has his muscle to fat ratio changed? Has his weight changed? Certain things like this. It's all important things to consider further on down the line, as it's things that will need to be potentially changed. Like, for example, if his body fat started to get higher, this is something he'd need to cut in future. If his muscle to fat ratio went down, you need to increase the muscle mass again. This would probably be quite easy due to muscle memory, but then again, it's another thing worth considering. Now, moving on, we've got the goal setting, and the goal setting is quite important as it allows a structure and a platform to work on. So the first is the short-term goals, and the short-term goals are they're short-term, as the name suggests, and there's a lot of them, and they'll get progressively harder dependent on the stage of healing. So starting off, they're very simple things like after the surgery, the foot will be placed into a brace, more specifically a cam brace or a controlled ankle movement brace. And what this will do is it will hold the ankle in position to prevent exertion on the tendon that's trying to repair. And the goal in this part is simply to get used to it. Get used to having the foot in the brace, not being able to move the ankle, and adapting to the change. Then the second goal is finding a hobby or an activity to perform in spare time to aid in the reduction of tedium and boredom. It's nothing like strenuous or difficult. It's just small things that will need to be done instead of the training that would be done on the tendon that can't deal with it at that moment in time. So the next step is maintaining the accumulated muscle mass, and don't lose more than 5 kilograms in body weight, because any weight that's lost will need to be put back on in future in order to adhere to the heavyweight guidelines. Obviously, if Hay loses too much weight, he won't fit into his weight criteria anymore. And then the moving into the strengthening phase, the short-term goals get more about increasing weight bearing and maintaining intensity of rehabilitation. So this is done to aid in the strengthening and the remodeling part of the healing process. Medium-term goals are more based around larger achievements. So by this point in the training program, around 12 weeks or 3 months in, we want to be aiming for the athlete to be able to bear their full weight on the injured tendon. And also we want them to, around the same part, around 14 weeks or 4 months in, we want them to be able to be entirely pain-free for a week. And this is correspondent with the treatment, in that the pain reduction treatments are of a lower importance, because the pain threshold will increase, and with the tendon improving in strength and in flexibility, the pain will hopefully be more easily bearable. Also at this point, around the 5-month mark, we want them to have a scan on the tendon to check the progress of the healing. And if everything is going as planned, then this will be very motivating for the athlete, as they'll see how far they've come since the injury actually occurred. Short-term goals are more based around mobility at this point, being able to reach the speeds and intensities that the that the athlete could reach prior to their injury. Medium-term goals are more about movement, so walking unassisted for 5 minutes followed by jogging for 5 minutes, for example. Being able to do this will be very motivating for the athlete. Following this, they'll be jogging for 800 meters unassisted. This will be repeated a number of times in order to improve on aerobic and cardiovascular endurance, which will be something that will be probably quite damaged by the injury. Long-term goals, these are the ones that are reached right at the end of the training program, and they're very specific to the sport. So around the 4 to 5 month mark, we want them to be returning to specific training drills, low intensity, obviously to begin with, avoiding the ballistic movements in order to prevent contraindication. Moving on from this, we want increasing range and intensity of the training drills. So this will increase the ballistic movements, the intensity, and this will help in producing more speed, more power, and more strength in the injured tendon. And finally, the final goal, which will be right at the end, the final 3 or 4 weeks of the training program, reaching month 6, would be returning to full training with comfort. So what I mean by this is that they don't feel any discomfort in their usual training, the training that they would be performing if the injury hadn't occurred, and having the capability to return to fighting, as I'm sure David Haye will in future. So being able to return to the ring, being able to do everything as he could, that's the main goal. Being able to return and perform as he would have performed if he hadn't have received the injury in the first place. So moving down, we've got a graph of the treatments and their importance in the healing process. So as you can see, there's certain treatments that start off high and work their way down. This one specifically being cryotherapy, starting off important and moving its way down. Flexibility is also starting high and working its way down. Soft tissue massage starts quite high and works its way down gradually. Deep tissue starts off low and works its way up. Obviously it wasn't important in the first 5 or 6 weeks due to the risk of re-injury. Sorry about that. And I said here the y-axis shows the scale of importance, so on a scale of 1 to 5, 0 being non-existent and 5 being essential, and the x-axis shows the weeks of the training program. So you can see here roughly how the treatments would change as the rehab program goes on. Now moving on, we have our second athlete, Aaron Ramsey, a professional footballer who plays in the Premier League as a central midfielder, plays for Arsenal FC. And this injury occurred quite a while ago. I think it was 2008 when he was playing against Stoke City FC. And if I remember correctly, it was a 50-50 tackle that Ramsey went for, and the player that broke his leg was Ryan Shawcross. And it was completely unintentional. It wasn't a malicious tackle by any means. It just wrong place, wrong time. 50-50. Shawcross went in with his studs up, caught Ramsey right on the shin with a lot of force, pretty much all of his body weight, and Ramsey's leg buckled around the force of the opponent's lunge, and this led to a total fracture, a closed fracture of the tibia and fibula in his right leg, which was his strong leg. And Ramsey's leg essentially horseshoed around Shawcross's boot, which was horrendous to watch, but it is what it is. I don't mean to sound too harsh in saying that. But anyway, the estimated recovery time given was quite broad given the severity of the injury. Well, it was 4 to 6 months. And typically if you have a break of either the tibia or the fibula, it will take around 3 to 4 months to repair. But because this was both the bones rather than just one of them, it was an increased and a bit broader time span. So anyway, the first stage, similarly to the first athlete, is the acute stage, so immediately after the injury. And the first goal is remodeling the injury. Obviously, the leg will have been misformed quite horribly, so this needs to be solved. So the remodeling will be done with closed reduction surgery on the leg in order to put the bones back into place, and also an intramuscular needle. And the reason this will be used is to drain the fluid from the swelling. It's possible that there will be a intramuscular bleed, internal bleeding, due to the broken bone, and this will need to be drained. This internal bleeding is quite a serious trouble. The leg will be placed into a full cast, making it completely immobile, maintaining the muscles, the bones and the muscles positions in order to prevent them moving and preventing the risk of re-injury. At this point, the treatments are quite simple. Soft tissue and deep tissue massage are irrelevant, given as the injury isn't muscular, and obviously deep tissue massage around a broken leg would probably hurt quite a lot. You wouldn't want to do that, and it potentially could malform the broken bone as well, so bad idea really. Cryotherapy and thermotherapy will be nice muscular relief. Given as the leg won't be moving very much, the muscles might be prone to cramping, atrophy. Cryotherapy and thermotherapy will help that. Acupuncture will also be important, as there'll be quite a lot of swelling in the area, and acupuncture will help to reduce the swelling and also help reduce the pain in the same way. Cupping, irrelevant, due to it being a bone break rather than a muscular injury. Taping. Taping, potentially quite important, but not necessarily essential. It'll be good for supporting purposes, but then again, the cast is there for a reason, so it's not as important. Flexibility training most likely won't be relevant quite yet, but we'll come into it later on. There may be some very, very light flexibility training, like static stretches, to maintain the muscles in the lower legs, like the calves, for example. Strength training is completely out of bounds at this point, just because it runs the risk of re-injury. So next is the recovery and movement reintroduction stage. So this is phase 2, and the goal is the general reintroduction of movement back into the daily life of the injured athlete. So firstly, towards the end of the first month and moving slightly into the second month, over a 3-week period, we want to allow the cast to reset the bone placement after the total fracture. So what this means is basically the cast will put the bones back into the natural position that they would be in, and the healing process would then start. And obviously this is going to be quite tedious, quite boring process, just waiting for it to happen, but unfortunately it's necessary. Treatments again are very similar. Soft tissue massage in order to prevent muscular degradation, the same as cryotherapy and thermotherapy. Acupuncture would still be important due to the swelling, but it would cease at some point, due to the swelling obviously subsiding, as it would do as the injury improves. Cupping again is not important. Taping, I've chosen taping as a 2 out of 5 in importance scale. The cast is going to stay on for this point, but the extra bit of support wouldn't go amiss, especially moving into the next part of this treatment phase. Flexibility remains the same, and strength training would just about start to come back into it. The next phase is remove the full leg cast and replace it with just a patella tendon bearing cast. So this is just the lower leg. It covers the calf muscle completely, basically knee to ankle.